everyone. The first thing I'd like to say is if you could all mute either your phones or your computers. There's a little button on the top there to mute yourself. Any conversation, questions you have, just use the chat box and we will answer those questions. And welcome to our webinar on how to pitch your store to publishers. And I want to thank Mary Beth Kelly, Kit Little, and Lara Phan for doing this for us. We're fortunate to work in an industry that helps each other and wants success for everyone. And to have this team share their expertise and insight. As a reminder, Publicity Speed Dating will be on Thursday, February 1st at Caroline's Comedy Club in Manhattan. Plan to arrive between 9 and 9:45 to check in. We begin at 10 a.m. The last appointment ends at 4:15 p.m. and Hachette is sponsoring a reception afterwards at a different location. I sent details in the email yesterday that had the list of publishers who are participating. And don't forget to send me your top 5 wish list so I can make sure you get appointments with people that matter most to you. And now I'll pass it over to our team. Thank you.
So on the call, like Eileen said, this is Maribeth. We have Eileen, who has been leading the way for NAIBA and all its members. Thank you. We also have Lara, Director.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. And she will be sharing her perspective from the publisher side of what she's looking for hearing from the booksellers. So a very important perspective. Thank you for being here.
Anytime. Anything for Eileen.
We have also Kit Little. She has a wide experience of working with the bookstore and NAIBA. She has a lot of experience that she can bring to new stores and experienced stores. So we're looking forward to hearing what her tips are as well. So, great. That was Kit. So when we were preparing for this call, oh, this is me. Sorry. Just my slide. I am a bookseller. I work with Towne, and I'm also a marketing consultant for other types of businesses in other industries. So I'm excited to help people learn how to be better marketers and sell more books. So Eileen, but when we were preparing for this call, everyone had put together a list of best tips for the booksellers in preparation for speaking to a publisher. Specifically, we kept in mind the speed dating event, but this really, if you're not attending the speed dating, this will apply to if you have to get on the phone with them or if you're going to be scheduling a private meeting with the publishers. These tips will all translate, so just adjust them accordingly. Eileen's best tip for the stores, which she's constantly being asked in preparation for speed dating, is how much to bring to the meeting. So this year she's expecting 36 imprints to be present at the meetings. That's a great opportunity for booksellers to be in front of a publisher. Some bookstores don't have that advantage at all, and it could go year to year without ever really having a chance to speak directly to a publicist like that. So this opportunity is great. And in preparation for that, you want to have enough materials. Please bring at least 30 press kits this year. That changes every year. But this year, please have at least that many extras you will always use as well. You're going to have if you're attending the event after speed dating, you may also be continually handing out your press kits. So at least 30. Lara had some really great tips that pertain to the publisher's point of view. Lara, if you can see that slide, you want to go through this and just kind of explain the major points here?
Sure, of course. So when we had the pre-call, the one thing from our perspective that I think really resonates with publicists and with publishers and with your sales reps as well is the passion that all of the stores, that you can exude the passion that you're feeling for a particular author or for a particular type of book or anything like that. I mean, that's the one thing that really resonates, that folks hold on to. I get a number of calls from publicists saying, do you remember that one bookstore that said they loved John Smith is an author I'm just making up, but, they're like, who was that again? And, and sometimes they remember things like the, lovely woman I was talking to had a blue clip in her hair, but she spent 20 minutes talking about how much she loved John Smith. Who was that person? We couldn't make it work for this first tour. We want to make it work for the next tour. Who is that? So, that's the one thing that definitely resonates and holds true and people remember is how much passion and enthusiasm and love that a bookseller, an event person, a bookstore owner, or whoever has for a particular author or, for a particular imprint or type of book. One thing we also mentioned on our call was I think a lot of publicists are asking folks, what are you doing outside of the store for events? I think everybody hears that they're like, what is happening that you're doing not just in store? And so we mentioned that aside from just your traditional working with a theater or any sort of traditional venue, think kind of outside the box of maybe some places that you could hold events that maybe are larger than your store or a little bit more creative. We know that not every store can hold hundreds of people in store, but maybe there's a dance studio that's down the street that doesn't hold classes on Sundays that would let you use the space for a very nominal fee or even free for some sort of co-promotion, that you could hold the event space, that you could just bring in some chairs and you could hold more than the 50 or 60 or 100 that are in your store. So, that's what we're thinking about in terms of creative outside venues. It doesn't have to be a big theater or anything like that. It can be another local business or a local restaurant or something like that. One thing I also mentioned is that it's not easy doing events, and I just want stores and event folks and everybody to know that right off the bat. Whether you're doing an event for 50 people in store or 500 people off-site, there's a lot of work on both ends. So whether it's a small event or a big event, it's just as much work, if not more so. So just keep that in mind as you're doing this. And that's why I think a lot of stores not just have a dedicated event person, they have dedicated event teams because of the amount of work with working with a publisher, working with your sales rep to get the order in, working with the outside organizations for promotion, your local media, all of that stuff. I think it's a lot more work than some folks realize before they get into it. And, there are stores that don't do events, and that's totally fine. You do not have to do events, but I just want people to know from the get-go that it's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely a labor of love sometimes, and I know publicists, much to my chagrin, will email stores at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, why are you emailing someone at 10 o'clock at night? You should not be working, but we get those emails, and, the publicists are dealing not just with events, but with media as well, so they're kind of always working. So I just want folks to be prepared for that part of it. Also, looking at your successes. One thing that I always say to stores when they're looking to say, like, what can I do to get more authors to kind of come, like, if I haven't hosted an author before, is that, you don't have to measure your success with just traditional or straight author events. If there are partnerships you do with stores or the local library or something like that, maybe there's a local book club that you have that, has grown from 5 people to 30 people, those are ways that you can measure success as well, that I feel like you should toot your own horn when you come. If you've never hosted an event before and you can say, we've had this book club that meets in the store that went from 5 people to 30 people in 6 months, and it's a regular thing. Those are successes, and, don't only think about your successes as straight author events. It can be things like book clubs, or, if you have like a teen book club, or, if there's a local chamber of commerce that regularly comes into the store, anything like that, like those count as successes as well. I already mentioned that the love and the impassioned pleas are not forgotten, and they definitely remember. But, and then the other thing too is what you're already doing, if you want to, I'm not saying that every store should, but if you want to grow, build on what you're doing and try to scale it. You don't have to go from, I've been doing 2 years of really great 50-person events, and I'm going to jump right into doing 500-person events. I don't mean like that, but I think as you're looking at what you're doing and saying, how do I want to grow this, whether it's in the community or with my local, community partnerships or with publishers, use the successes you have to work with us and work with your reps and work with your local community to build on that and just say, here's what I'm doing. How can we work together? What more do you want to see from me?
Excellent. That's great. So, I mean, the things that stood out for me were tout your successes, even if they seem small or irrelevant. They really will show your successes if you're not doing author events. So, I think that's one that can be highlighted on the press kit. And also, scaling practically. I think that's important for stores who are starting out when they're growing their events. We'll talk more about that. But yeah, I think that's important to understand to scale your events practically, realistically. Thank you. So the next list of tips that we have are from Kit. Kit, if you could go through your list to share for the booksellers, that'd be great.
Sure. For those of you who aren't familiar with Towne, when we started, we were about 2,300 square feet. So we started small, a little hole in the wall, one window in the front, and an office in the back. And then we eventually got to 5,500 square feet, and now we're 8,000 square feet. So we've been doing this from the time where we could barely fit 10 chairs in a circle in the back, and that was only if we blocked the office door so that we could have a small book club, to the size that we are now and the types of events that we did. Because we couldn't handle events in store at the time, we started focusing a little bit on getting out of the store, especially with schools. And it was a lot of work, and it took us some time to build up to where we are now. But we do school visits. I average approximately 11 school visits for each half of the school year. And we've slowly built our network to the point now where we do have some schools that contact us, which I love, but I have my core group of schools that I contact every time. We have also developed relationships with a couple of our local libraries so that we do annual fundraisers for them, and actually biannual, because we have two of them that we do 2 fundraisers every year. And they do all the work. They get the venue, they set everything up, they sell the tickets, they handle everything. All I have to do is bring them an author, which is nice because that's kind of on the easier side of having to do those. Then we also have some corporate fundraisers we do by having been invited to go and be a vendor at certain things where we didn't even necessarily make any money at those, but we were allowed to go and present our store and hand out coupons and things like that. We developed relationships that eventually led to, like with one particular organization, they were already doing an annual fundraiser every year, and they were searching for speakers. And we have been able to work with them enough that now we get their speaker almost every single year. For the last 7 years now, we have had every year except for one. And then we also do a few other small things to help with making sure we have events and attendance for our events. We sponsor some local book clubs. If the book club comes to us and tells us what book they're reading for the month and orders 8 or less, we are able to give them a 10% discount on their books. And the reason that this is very integral is that to do so, we have to have a contact information for the leaders of each of those book clubs. And then when we do have an event, we can send out an e-blast to them and say, hey, if you want to pick this book for this month, we're going to have the author here in the store. And that helps build up some of our attendance numbers. And we do a lot with our local authors. And one of the things that works very well for us is panels. So even if I have a publisher contact me and say, we have this author, they're new, it's a debut book, I can ask them if we can put them on a panel, and we fill it out with either local authors we know, or we offer that publisher the opportunity to give us a second debut author or local author, or I will go to a rep from one of my other publishing houses and ask them if they have any local authors that might want to join us for a panel. And those have been working very well as well. And we do launch parties for local authors, where we encourage that the local author has to invite every single person they know. We give them the date, the venue, we market it, but they also market it, and we try to use that. So those are some of the smaller things we do and some of the larger things that we do. And I also want to reinforce what Lara said, because one of the things that worked really well for me was remembering to tell a publisher how much we loved a particular author. And I know full well that there are some pretty significant authors and some smaller publisher house authors that we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't gone ahead and said, we love this person. This is how many books of theirs we've sold. This is how we display them in the store. And doing the little tiny things to let them know how much we appreciate those particular authors in order to get them into the store.
And I'm just going to jump in here to say that one of my first meetings with Kit, she waxed poetic 5 minutes about an author that she loved, and this was probably 5 or 6 years ago where I met Kit for the first time. I will admit, number one, we have not gotten a chance to get that author to her store, but I do remember to this day, she asked every time, and even if she didn't, I remember the impassioned plea that she made for this one author, and every time that that author is going on tour, I begged the publicist, is there any way he will be in the Mid-Atlantic area? Can we get him to Towne Center Books? And this author has not been in the area before, so that is, but I'm like, what can we do for this next tour to get him to that area? So we do remember, and the publicist is almost to the point where he says to me, I know what you're going to ask me about this author. I know you want me to send this author to Towne Center Books. And so he remembers as well, even though, there's definitely the passion, the love, we remember it, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Kit, anything else?
That's it, other than questions.
So the things that I took away from what Kit said that apply to the bookseller, especially if they're new, is to understand that their business development, the networking, getting on the radar of publishers and publicists, being dedicated to the effort of building their events is so important, and it ties into what Lara has said as well, is just that you don't realize how much work is entailed, but if you have a dedicated team in place that works on the different parts that are needed to build your list, build the business development part of it, you too will have the successes that will grow, each year, like Towne Center has been doing. So thank you, Kit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to stop there and just check the chat to see if there's any questions. Okay, so I have one here. When you go to speed dating, this is from Kathy, do you have a specific list of authors that go with the publicists that you want?
I do. On occasion, it depends on, if I have somebody I know that I really want, I will see if their publisher is going to be represented, and I will go with that specific person. But the other thing I do is specific events that I definitely need to fill.
Great.
And I will add, I think that the whole point of Eileen doing this once or twice a year is, to get the publicists who are not often in the stores, even though they're only a few hours away or even a few minutes away, to remember some of the stores is that if you don't have authors in mind, but that if your goal is to just go and have the publicists know that you're a store that can do events in whatever territory you are in, that is perfectly fine too. I think that, if you go in with a mission, that is great and amazing. If you're like, there's these 2 authors I want, but I don't think that, I think we're already asking folks to, update their spreadsheets and come down to New York in a couple weeks. And we know that you already have a lot of stuff that you're doing in store already. So I don't think anybody's asking any bookseller to take time off of doing what you're doing already for your store and combing through the list and saying, okay, I need to have one Dutton author and one Putnam author and one Hachette author and one Holt author. And I don't think that's, but if you have, if you have an author that you would love to have, and then you're meeting with someone from Putnam and you say, here's this Putnam author I love, that would be great. But I don't think that you have to, for all those 36 imprints that Eileen mentioned are going to be there, you don't have to have one author for all of them. But if you have an author, that's great, but it's not necessarily something that's necessary. But I think the focus would be more on, if you don't have someone, just kind of saying, here's who we are, here's what we can do, please send us some authors, here are some ideas of who we're looking at for.
Absolutely. I can definitely attest to that. It was our first meetings at speed dating. That's how we didn't know exactly what we were going to be asking for until we started the conversation and started making good relationship contacts. So perfect. So Eileen, did you have anything to add?
No, it was covered there.
Okay. Some of my best tips that I thought would...
something.
All I was going to say is it's not just about having a list of authors you want or the types of venue you want. Also be conscientious of the publishers you don't have a relationship with yet. Eileen lets you put on a wish list of 5. And I would look for a publisher also that I know that I don't work with yet, that I really want to start a relationship with. And that's pretty significant too.
Absolutely.
If I can jump on that as well, there are publishers there that you might have a bias against, and I would like you to leave that at the door. They have far wider lists than you might be aware of, and you should go in open-minded when you're meeting with all publicists.
Absolutely. And we also will be providing a tool for everyone to do a little prep before the day of speed dating. So this is a kind of like an evolving document. It's something that I've pulled together with what I do, but it definitely is not the only way to prepare for your meetings. So again, using all the information that we just shared right now up to this point, use it to how it will best fit your store and your goals. So moving on, if just some of the tips that I had shared with the team before we went for prep for this call. As the stores develop their planning systems, I feel like with Booktown, when I first started working there, we had no systems in place, so we really were starting from scratch and evolving and looking at other stores that were doing events successfully, and I was pulling from them and modeling what they do and incorporating it into Booktown system. So once we established a system, I wanted the publishers to know and see results of our system. So we learned to grow our marketing and our how we actually meet and greet with an author, and how we interact with the audience or the attendees, and also how we register them as the event started growing. So in my mind, there was definitely different stages to our growth of event planning and event marketing. And so for those that are just starting out, realize that as well. That just like anything else, you're going to start off small with really a simple type of events that don't have a lot of moving pieces. And then you will continue growing each year. And from there, you'll be expanding, getting more leverage, and growing the size of your events, kind of like what Lara was speaking about before. It's like from 50, you're not going to really jump to 500 naturally. There's going to be a progression to that, expanding what's already working. And then there's the advanced type of events that are complex. They involve ticket taking. Maybe there's some fees for processing tickets. Maybe there's a rental fee. You're bundling a ticket with the attendance of the event. So there are all these other moving pieces, plus staff and the staff of the author. So again, give yourself some time to understand that there's a path to this, and you will be able to achieve all of what you want to. And as long as you just focus on it, really, that's how we grew. So know the level of your store and know what you're producing successfully, and continue to grow and expand that. And that's the best tip I can give to all the stores today. I'm just going to check the chat to make sure there's nothing remaining on questions, and we're going to move into, if no one else on the team has something to add, we're going to move.
Oh, it looks like I see a question. I don't know if it was sent just to me. That looks like from Kathy.
Go
that
ahead.
Asked me, Lara, can you tell us a pitch that has stuck with you? I mean, so usually the ones that stick with me are kind of the ones that stand out, whether it's from and I think I'm just going to tell, when I first met Kit, the pitch that stuck with me is that she spent 5 minutes telling me how much she loved Terry Brooks and why she loved Terry Brooks and what the books meant to her when she first read them, and to her family, and to, I think, her husband, I think it was, and if that's not correct, Kit, I apologize. But, so that has stuck with me. Yes. But so those things have stuck with me, as well as just, hearing things, I think as time has gone on, not just the passion, but when people are saying things to me like, I have customers that come in weekly asking me to have, an author like John Grisham. I know John Grisham doesn't do things, but who else do we have that you think would work like John Grisham that I could offer up to these customers that are asking for somebody like this? So those are the kinds of things that really stuck with me. And, the things that have a little bit, honestly, for me, that have a little bit of a personal touch to it. And I don't mean, it doesn't have to be, my son or my daughter loved this author since they were X or Y ages old. But, sometimes when they're just like, someone just saying to me, I read all of these books in front of my, in my front porch with my dog sitting in my lap, for whatever reason. And I'll remember them sitting on the front porch with their dog on their lap reading these books, and I'll say to the publicist, can you believe this? And they're just like, that's great. So those are the sorts of things. If there's just like a little bit of a personal, it doesn't have to be the entire life story, but if any sort of personal touch, or, also if you're saying something like, we have 8 staff members and 7 of them are huge fans of these authors, that they fight over this arc or this galley when it comes in the store. Those are the things that really resonate with me, that kind of keep me going, okay, I have to remember that this person loves this author. And there have been times where I've said, not necessarily to Kit, but to other event folks, were you the one that really loved, so-and-so? And they're like, no, it wasn't me. And I'm like, okay. And it turns out that maybe it wasn't that store, but it was someone with a store with a similar name, or the event person had the same first name but a different last name. So I don't keep them necessarily all as straight as I keep the impassioned. And Kit has made more than one impassioned plea to me for other authors, but Terry Brooks is the one that I remember specifically. So, but those are the things that I think that really work for us.
That's excellent.
That's helpful.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next phase of this call. We're going to move into a role-playing scenarios, and we'll explain that. Before we segue into there, just wanted to reiterate what really matters is that you just understand the objective of the day at speed dating, and we ask you that you do prep. And if you care to, there's going to be a tool that we're going to distribute that you can use, or you can just do your own thing, that it helps you get focused on what your goals and what you want to achieve out of these meetings. And if it's simply just introducing your store to the publishers, great. That's great. And from there, you will grow those relationships. Again, bring your press kits. This year, we're looking for at least 30. And then, again, we said this specific goal. So we're going to move on to the role playing. Lara and Kit are going to role play 2 different levels of stores. One is going to be the new store starting out, where they have small and they're looking to grow their events. So we're going to spend at least about 5 minutes, and this is all ad lib, folks. So give them some time to get in the flow. But I just wanted to set my timer so we were cognizant of the time that we spent on this section. And why don't we just let you two start up? Like, you just imagine yourself sitting at the table and the meeting is starting.
I'll set the scene. I walk up to the table. Laura's already sitting there. I already have my press kit in hand, which is 1 page, by the way, front and back. I slide my press kit across the table. I reach out and shake Laura's hand and introduce myself as, my name is Kit, and I'm from the Towne Book Center, Wine Bar, and Cafe. And it's a pleasure to meet you.
And I would say it's a pleasure to meet you as well, Kit. I would love to hear about your store. Just to give you a little bit of background on who I am and what I do, I work in Penguin Random House on the events team. I'm not an actual publicist, but I work with publicity very closely on booking the tours and setting things up. I think if I was, just as an aside, if I was a publicist, I might just actually introduce myself and say what imprint I work with. I don't know that the publicist would necessarily, unless they work only on hardcovers or only on paperbacks, they might not mention specifically if they only work on one type of book, but I have asked them if they only work on sci-fi or fantasy or only children's, to try to mention that so that the booksellers are aware of what they are looking for. So then, so back to the role play. So then I would say I would probably be glancing at the Kit to have an idea of what she's looking for, but then I would just say, Kit, tell me a little bit about your store, what you're looking for. Have you hosted authors? Anything that you think would be helpful, yes.
Sorry? Our new store.
Sorry, go on.
We're looking to get started with some in-store and off-site events if possible. And I was hoping for some assistance with getting a couple of A-list authors, as well as some of the local and smaller debut authors that you might have.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, I do want to say that there is a chance, with some of our higher A-list authors, they might not happen right away, because I think, some of those, there are so many layers to having a celebrity or a pseudo-celebrity type author. We may not want to send them somewhere where we don't have a ton of experience, but I think that if we can look at some local authors as well as some other authors that would work for you, we'd be happy to try to work with you on there. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of the type of author? Or is it fiction, nonfiction? Is it a specific type of fiction, mystery, genre, anything like that? I think that would be help. I think if we send you someone, we want to send you someone that's going to be a success, not just someone for the sake of having someone that might not work for your community. So any information about your community would be great.
And this is the point at which I would suggest that if you are a specific genre store, you ask for your genre. If you are particularly passionate about a specific genre, you go with that, because what you know best is going to work best for you. And you're also going to be able to have a more impassioned plea when you speak to the publicist about it. So for me, one of mine, I went in and I wanted to talk to fantasy publicists. So I had said, I'm really looking to break through with some new events for some fantasy authors. And I wondered if you have anybody that might be interested in taking a chance for this on a fantasy event before.
And then at this point, seeing as that I am a little more of a generalist and I don't know the list extensively, I would probably say, I don't know exactly, but if you let me know who you're working for. The publicists probably know a little bit more better than I do, where the authors live and that sort of thing. So if it's a publicist that works with fantasy or sci-fi, they might mention one or two authors that they're like, well, this author lives nearby. Have you ever done anything with him or her? Or if the answers come back from the bookseller as no, we have a lot of fans and a lot of customers and staff that love this type of book, I might say to them as a question, well, do you have an idea of how well these books sell? If there's any information aside from the impassioned plea that I can bring back to the fantasy or sci-fi publicist to kind of say, if you say to me that you sell 20 Terry Brooks books a week, that to me is clearly a sign that this store has not just booksellers that love Terry Brooks, but they're passing that on to their customers and saying, try this, and they're constantly restocking. That's when I can go back to the publicist with and say, I know that you're sending Terry Brooks to this area, and this is a store we haven't tried with him, but what do you think about, this store that's selling 15 Terry Brooks books a week, which, as we know, is an extraordinary number of books to sell in 1 week of one author. So that's, something along that way. But I think that if you don't have a genre and type that you're looking for specifically, and you're not sure, I think that's fine too. If you can just say, we're not sure, because we often have authors that we don't know where this author fits. Like, we think this is a woman's fiction author, or maybe there is more of a, even though this book is like those alternate, not history, but the alternate history, or the here's a different take on Rapunzel. Like, where do those actually fall in? They're not exactly sci-fi, they're not exactly fantasy, they're not traditional fiction. Where does that fall in? So I think that if there are things you're open to, the publicist would love to hear that. I'm sorry, I'm getting off the role playing a little bit. But then also, if you're open to doing one thing that we sometimes do is that if a store is open to doing off-site sales for us, when an author is organizing something through a local, another local organization, we'd love to hear that, because sometimes that is something that we can get an in. So if I can say, oh, I met Kit at this great NAIBA book selling event. We don't really have an author in her area, but here's an author who's doing something at their local Democratic Society. We need a bookseller to come in and sell. Let's contact Kit, see if her store can do it. If she does it,
I do that all the time.
Yes, and to me that counts as an event, because there are logistics with that, and that's something that I can build on from there.
Excellent.
Kathy asked a question that I want to answer, because at least from my end, as the person who is proposing, if there's an author that I want help with, I will contact my rep, and I have the relationship now with several of them that they will send an impassioned plea for me, in addition to my plea to get a specific author.
Great.
And from the publishing standpoint, for Kathy's question, the answer is yes and no. It depends on, I think, honestly depends on the market, the author, and how much the author is willing to do. I think you see that the tours are never, I think that in theory, an author could probably do 100 events throughout the entire country and get 100 stores that would love to host most authors. But sometimes it's hard because the budgets and the media is not always there. So we have to look at and pick and choose our battles. It's hard when somebody says to me, okay, we have this author who wants to do something in the suburbs of Philly. What store do you recommend? And there's 3 or 4 stores. And in theory, I know that all those stores are not in the same town. They're anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes apart from one another. So you could probably actually do all 3 of these stores and have very small overlap in audience and still get 30 to 40 people for somebody who's not huge. But we just don't have the time, the money to keep an author there for 3 days to do 3 events in a row. And, a store that goes third might be like, well, I don't want to be the third store to go because, everybody went to the event at Town Center or to the event at Newtown, and they're not going to come to my store. So it just depends on, I think, what the budgets and that sort of things are. But the reps their impassioned plea, like Kit said, do matter. But sometimes it comes down to money or what the media is looking, or what the author might want to do. There are sometimes where we would love to send an author to a particular city. We have so many impassioned pleas from the booksellers and the event person and the store owner and myself, as well as the rep. And the author might be like, I just don't want to go there this time. I went there the last 2 tours. I'd like to go somewhere different. And it's just like, oh, but if you went this last time, we get this other store in. So we try, but sometimes it's even out of the publicist's hands. Yeah.
Great. There are so many moving pieces, but I think what is important there is that you make yourself known as a new store to the publisher, and you never know how you could plug into a different type of event or be a part of a bigger event. So it's all such an important conversation. If you feel like that role play is complete in its sense, we can move on to the role playing for a more experienced store.
Yeah, the only thing that I would mention about the new stores, to make sure that if your contact information, I know that Mary Beth has mentioned this before, that if your contact information is not front and center on the contact sheet, if you have either a card or something else, to make sure that the publicist has that card, so that way when they say, hey, how do I contact this person, they'll come to me. But this way, at least I might be like, well, didn't they give you a business card, or is it on their one sheet? So that way they know how to reach you and what you're interested in.
Absolutely. Great. Let's see here. I have another question from Helen. Helen asks, at the speed dating, how important is it for us to have media people or networks we can promote the event to?
I think it's important, but it's not the most important thing. I think that if you have a very strong customer base that comes out for events or just comes to the store on a regular basis and get the word out just through your own channels, through your own social media, your own newsletter, your own email newsletters, that sort of thing, that's great. But I think not every store has folks that will do that. But I know there's at least one store I can think of on the West Coast who is in an area where there's not a lot of media, there's not a lot of anything except for their own personal promotion. And they're able to, whenever they have an author, regularly get, 50 or 60 customers to come out for an event. And I'm always like, but you have no media where you are. And they're like, our customers just know and trust that what we're doing, and they want to come to our events and support us, and they love the authors that come out. So I think it is important, but at the same time, we know, the publicists are aware, because media is the second most important part of their job. They're aware that media is not what it was 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 years ago, where there was all these local newspapers, and, even I know some places are doing like the Patch as kind of their, like online newspaper, or only doing online newspapers, but it's not as effective. As someone that lives in northern New Jersey, I used to get the paper all the time, and I would read it on the way into work, but the paper stopped pretty much producing a daily paper, and we don't get it anymore. And I can go online to read what's happening in my local area, but I forget on the way to work, honestly, to go on. I'm like, I don't want to be on my phone on the way to work, so I end up reading a book instead. But I think that it's important, but if you don't have it, it's not going to make or break you. But I think if you can express or show that you have a local network, whether it's through partnerships of local businesses or your local chamber of commerce, or just the fact that your own newsletter and Facebook is effective, that's great too. I think a lot of stores are finding that Facebook ads, or even like those boosted Facebook ads where you pay a little bit of money and they kind of target people in your area, that seems to be more effective these days. And I think, than even some local media.
Totally agree with that.
All I do is I have a sentence or two in my press kit that's dedicated to all the different means that I have to promote every one of them. I don't use every one of them on every single event, But to say that we have this many people on our email list, our in-store signage, believe it or not, in-store signage matters, especially with a lot of the publishers that I talk to. They'll specifically ask me if I have a display in the store. And so anything that we have that might be available to us that we would use, I include in just 2 sentences. And then they see it, or they ask me, and I already have it right there that I can explain it to them.
And I will say one thing before we go into the more experienced store is that I know that you all will and have worked really hard on your one sheets. There are many times where, because it's a conversation, even though the publicist may have glanced at the one sheet, they may have missed the part where they say, oh, do you report to the New York Times? And even it could be the very first line in your one sheet. And you thinking to yourself, I spent hours and days on this one sheet, and the very first thing that lists here is where my store is, or if I report to the New York Times, or if I report to BookScan, or if I report to the ABA bestseller list, or if I'm a member of NAIBA, or one of the other associations. Try not to get frustrated. It makes me frustrated sometimes when I'm like, oh, it says it right here. I just asked them how many people can fit in their store. I saw it and didn't register it. And it's just because I think, as they're going to the speed dating, especially I think in the afternoon session, they will have gone through so many appointments already. It's not that they're not paying attention and they're not reading all of the hard work you put into your one sheet. I think it's just, as the day goes on, we all get a little bit brain dead, and they just think, here are the things that I need to know. And I'd rather have a conversation rather than, or they just missed it on the one sheet. And it's, but try not to take that personally.
I've actually just used that document as a tool, and not like a, something that you follow verbatim during the conversation. But when you have a point like that coming up, I think it's good for the booksellers to bring a thicker pen and kind of highlight that section as they're talking. And so when the publisher takes that back to their office and they're reviewing it, they'll see those things and it'll kind of recall the conversation. So it's just really a tool, and that can be absorbed much later to kind of direct the conversation. But again, it's not like something that you cannot expect them to read and absorb that information during that meeting. It's all about, how the dialogue is going to go. So yeah, important point. All right, I think we're good on questions. I'm going to move on just for sake of time as well. We definitely went over the 5 minutes, but that was good. It was all great.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No. It was all excellent information. I was taking furious notes, so it's all good. And we're going to move on to the next slide. So again, this role playing, we're going to set the stage again for an established store. So they have some experience and so they have some data to prove that their systems are in place, and they have a supportive community that is book buying. So I'm going to let you two take this.
Actually, I kind of use what I used at my last year publicity speed dating pitch for this one.
Okay, sounds perfect.
And perfect kind of publishing house for this one too. Again, same thing. Laura's sitting there. I walk up. I hand my publicity prep kit to her, shake her hand. My name is Kit. I'm from the Towne Book Center and Cafe. And I'm here because I'm specifically seeking assistance in a particular type of event that I'm trying to establish. I work with 5 different organizations to do very large offsite events each year. I'm looking for authors that can bring in 400 to 450 people, ticketed event, and a book guaranteed sold with every single ticket. Do you have any authors that would fit that description?
We definitely do, and I think the most important thing that I'm curious about is if you have a list of somewhere on this sheet or somewhere else, if you have a list of who you've had or who these organizations have had in the past to give us an idea of the type of author you're looking for, or if you're looking to kind of scale this larger, it would still be helpful to have a list of the past authors as well as what the book sales were if it was beyond the 400 to 450, so that when we go back to the publicists and to the authors' teams, we can say, yes, they've hosted this author in the past, but they want to scale it larger, which is why we're looking for a larger name. If this organization, if you happen to know if this organization, this library in particular, is only looking for women's fiction authors, are they looking to expand into nonfiction? Are they open to having male authors? Is it only female authors? The other thing that I don't see mentioned here is if any of these organizations have any money to help pay for travel. I know not everybody does, and it won't be a make or break, and it's not a do or die for this, but I think that can certainly be helpful, especially with some of our marketing budgets being a little bit tighter these days than they are in the past. I know sometimes organizations have some money for either travel or lodging, and I think that can help definitely sway a publicist in a more positive direction. If you have any of that information, that'd be great. And, if you don't have it with you here, you can feel free to email me, and I'm happy to go back to some more information. But, even without having that, I think knowing what type of author you're looking for will help scale what we're looking for in terms of the authors. I don't want to suggest someone who lives in Canada or out in the Bay Area who is only able to come out to Pennsylvania if, we have some money for airfare.
Actually, the last paragraph of my press kit gives you an example list of the authors that we've had, whether it's been on-site or off-site, how many people have attended, and how many books have sold. They include A-list authors all the way down to local debut authors. And I'm looking specifically I have 2 libraries. One will do 250 people. The other will do up to 450. And I have a very special organization I've been working with. It's the Healthy Women Organization of a local hospital. And they seek only a female author, and the book has to be tied into health in some way.
That is very specific, and I probably don't have the list in front of me, but why don't you and I, since we only have 12 minutes or 10 minutes at the speed dating, why don't we make sure we connect next week once we all kind of regroup and find some time on the phone to kind of flesh this out a little bit more. We can go through the list together to see who there might be. We'll make sure your rep is in the loop. But this is a fantastic event, and it sounds great. I mean, we always love the guaranteed book sales. And so, but this is, it's always great when they're this specific, but sometimes it makes it harder. But if we have somebody who we can make work, we're happy to do it. And if we don't have somebody who's on, our front list, but maybe there's someone who has had a book and doesn't live that far, maybe in DC or something, that maybe just had a book this last fall or something that's still in hardcover that might be something that they're interested in, we can consider that as well. If you think they'd consider somebody who's had a book that's been out for 3 or 4 months.
That would be perfect. This event takes place in May, and we also are able to sell backlist on site in addition to the guaranteed sales per ticket. And Laura, this is real.
Okay.
Coming up.
Well, then we should definitely, my answer is also real. We should definitely talk maybe after Winter Institute and after speed dating to figure out who might work. But, there's 1 or 2 people that I'm like, oh, this might be an option, but I just don't know for sure if they're willing to travel and do stuff beyond. But that is a very specific example for sure.
So what's great about that is that it's obvious that the follow-up to these meetings is so important. So booksellers, please make time for your post-follow-up phone calls and emails to, as you're having these meetings, you want to be making notes of your action items to do as a follow-up. So that was perfect. Anything else you want to add to this role-playing?
Can I answer Kathy's question?
Oh, yeah, go for that.
Okay. I target colleges. I target libraries. The Healthy Woman Organization actually came about that was one of the ones where we started as just a vendor. We didn't get paid anything. We didn't have to pay to go, but all we did was set up a table and have healthy-based author books. It was very interesting how it all turned out. And I also ended up starting a book club with them, for them, eventually, after a couple more years. And then, yes, every program I have, including the way I run my school visits, I've done it all by myself. So it's really important, I think, to have a point person, because if you have someone calling and they're talking to a different person each time, it can get very confusing. So it's best to have one point person at the store that is handling these kinds of inquiries. And I know a lot of you have very small staffs, and when we started this, there were 5 of us. So that's what I did. That was my thing. There's not many more than 5 of us at this point either, even though we're much larger at this time, but I'm still the primary point person, and I'm happy to answer any questions or help anybody via phone call, emails, whatever you want, to talk to you about my programs, how I set them up, and how they work for us.
Great.
And I want to add from our side, from what I've seen from not just stores in our area that we're talking about for the speed dating, but in other areas of the country, there are some times where a customer will walk in and say, oh, I'm a member of the Southern California Women's Association. We have a conference every year. We'd love to have authors come. We just never think about it, or we go through a speakers bureau, and how do we avoid spending $30,000 for an author to come? And the bookstore might be like, well, if, the bookstore's reply was then, if you let us sell the books and as the official bookstore for the conference, and we, can do our big keynote as one book, one ticket. We can try to figure out what you're looking for. And I get and got a very impassioned and lovely email from a bookseller saying we have an opportunity to have a female author speak to potentially, 5,000 women in Southern California. We just need to have somebody who has a positive message about women. Who do you have? What can we do? What are we looking at here? And it's going to be a guaranteed minimum 600 books sold book with ticket for this keynote, and then on top of other book sales throughout the weekend or the day. And so those are things, that's something where an organization came in and they kind of grew that together. But then there's also other bookstores who just make connections with a local theater and say, I notice on Monday nights you're dark. I think there's a couple bookstores that don't just use like a fancy theater where they have ballets, but they use like a movie theater that happens to have a little bit of a stage. And Monday and Tuesday nights, the theater is basically empty, and the theater is willing to say to the bookstore, you can bring an author to the theater and they can sit in these beautiful, lovely, movie theater seats and have it it's usually raked so you can, have better views. You can fit more people that are in the store, and they come to the movie theater, and, the movie theater is happy to have people come through the door, possibly buy concessions, so they make some money that way. They don't have to show a movie, but then the author speaks, and then the author either then goes to the store if it's nearby to sign books, or they just sign in the lobby of the movie theater, and it's just is really great. And it's, it's a night of movie theaters like, well, we have to pay someone to be here anyway, and we're open, but nobody's coming to the movies on Monday night, but they would come out for an author event. It's something else that our community is able to offer. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a big fancy theater, but now that bookstore has that. That's one of their programs that they're, this theater and this bookstore together are presenting 2 Mondays a month an author, whether, regardless of how big or how small, but this author is there, they have an author there for that. Yeah, that's something that they, built themselves, but that, they figured out a way.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so that was excellent. And again, very helpful. I think a lot of people took away a lot of notes. Even if you're starting out, there's still a lot of information that you can glean from to apply to your store that's developing systems for your event planning. So again, to recap, you have 12 to 13 minutes with each publisher. Again, that could change based on each year and how many appointments we have that Eileen has to schedule. So use your time wisely. Again, use your press kit as a tool. It is not to replace the conversation that is going to happen between you and the publisher. Again, find out what area of expertise the publisher is working within and try to mold your pitch to that. And then also keep in mind that your conversation can spark a great idea. So again, with Kit's role playing, she had a specific request, but since something from there may come about, it may not be exactly what she was looking at, but it may even be better or something just different. So again, keep that conversation, follow up with that conversation and the momentum of that excitement of that conversation afterwards, after your appointments.
And I will add one thing. I can't attest for other publishers, but on the Penguin Random House side, I have heard from booksellers that they've emailed a publicist and then they've heard no response. Feel free to, when you email the publicist, to keep your PRH rep or myself looped in, because sometimes it's a matter of if you really, really want an author, like if Kit really wants this women's health author and she has not heard from the publicist for 3 weeks and she's like, the deadline is in a week, Lara, what do I do? I've said it before, and I will say it again. The publicists know I say this. I have no problem getting out of my chair, going upstairs, and quote unquote running into them in their office and saying, "Did you see Kit's email about this health thing? She sent it 3 weeks ago. You haven't heard back." And if they claim that they don't have the email, I'm happy to forward it to them right then and there and say, "Let's take a look at this. What do you think? Can we make this happen? Can we not make it happen?" And sometimes when they're faced with me in their face, they just want to get me out of their office, so they say yes or no.
I can verify that she does this because this has happened.
And even if the answer is no, which is sometimes what we don't want, but at least then we have an answer and you can move on to looking at your next author. And, and this happened, I think, last fall when Kit was trying to find somebody for the library program she was working for. We were getting down to the wire, and I was like, okay, give me 10 minutes. And I called her 10 minutes later. I'm like, I'm sorry, the answer is no. We called the author's agent and find out the author's going to be in Europe during that time. But it was just one of these things that the publicists have so many emails, and we all have so many emails and so many things on our to-do list. Sometimes these things fall off, not because you're not important, but just because they're thinking, oh, I'm going to deal with all of my stuff for Anna Quinlan tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and Anna Quinlan stuff happens, but then they only do 6 of the 10 things for Anna. And our question about the health thing happens to be question 8. So I'm happy to either myself or someone on my team or one of our reps are able to, light a little fire under sometimes the publicists.
Absolutely.
I also say that Laura talks about us having met. I did go to New York twice, and
that's true. I should mention that. Yes,
several of the publishing houses for each day. However, I would like to note that I've also been to all but one of the publicity speed dating events, and I have come away from publicity speed dating with far more than I came away from my trip to New York. I still think you should go to New York if you can, but I think that publicity speed dating should be a part of every year's events for you or someone on your staff. And that's not just because I'm a part of setting it up. It genuinely has helped me a lot. And the other thing that I would tell you is never, ever be afraid to ask for anything. Because I have been pitching for a particular author other than Terry Brooks every time I see his name. And my rep actually came to me one day, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but they laughed at me. And I said, why are you laughing at me? He goes, you're never going to get that author. And I said, but you recognize that I have pitched for that author every single time. I've even seen that he has a book come out, which means eventually his publicist is going to recognize that I've pitched for him every time his book has come out. And someday I'm going to get him or I'm going to get somebody like him. And sure enough, I did. I ended up getting a television celebrity instead. But it was an amazing event. It was on-site and off-site, which was huge work. But I'm not afraid to ask for anybody, no matter who they are.
And I will say, after these speed dating, so I will say, I have made the decision, whether Eileen is happy with it or not, to not go to the speed dating, because I want the publicists to be involved and engaged with the stores that go. I don't want them to kind of see me as a crutch, to be like, oh, Lara's here, she'll listen to all the information. I don't have to worry so much about it. So I don't go for that reason. But I will say, I think on average we send 5 to 8 publicists every time Eileen does one of these, and I would say out of those 5 to 8 publicists, 4 to 7 of them afterwards are either thanking me for it or they're saying, there are all these stores I had no idea were doing events. Who can we send there? What can we do together to get some more events there? And then and honestly, there's once or twice where they've said to me, I met this great store at the speed dating. What can you tell me about them? Who else have they hosted? And it's a store that I was like, I didn't even know they wanted to do events because I didn't go to the speed dating. I didn't know because this is when they introduced themselves. But it was a way for me to say to the store, hey, I heard you were at the speed dating and you wanted to do more events. The publicist told me how excited you were. Let's get you on the radar, not just for this one publicist, but for all my publicists. So, the publicists do come back, at least to me, and say, this is a great event. I loved this store. They provide me feedback. I love that store, so that when I'm talking to other publicists and other imprints, and somebody from Doubleday says to me, I'm not sure about this store. What do you think? I can say, well, I don't have much experience with them, but I know that they met your colleague from Putnam, and the colleague from Putnam was very convinced, and they've sent these 2 authors, and they go, oh, okay, great. If Putnam's doing it, then I want to do it. And they, they're like, I just got to call from Doubleday, and I'm like, that's great. So, people do talk.
Yeah, and I think starting those relationships so you can build upon and find your advocates and get on their radar is so important. So just showing up to the NAIBA sponsored events are you're that much closer to your success and your goals. So I think that was excellent. Thank you so much.
We have another question.
Yeah, we have another question.
Oh, we do. Okay, so Ashley asks, any thoughts on how to pitch if there is one venue, in our case, the free library, that sucks up authors large and small?
Ashley, I would the same exact problem because we're not that far from them.
Yes, I will say what you should do is, so I'm just going to use an example, and I don't know if they're on the call, so Doylestown, if you're on the call, I apologize for using you without your advance permission, but I had this conversation with Chrissy years ago where she was like, the free library gets everybody. I don't know what I can do. She came to a speed dating, met a publicist, said, we'd love to have, we'd love to have authors. I think Doylestown is probably like 45 minutes to an hour outside of Philly. It's a different audience. Most of our customers are not going to go into Philly to see this author. What can we do? And I think the answer for us and for a lot of other publishers probably related to money is that they're not going to be able to do an event in most cases at the Philly Free Library and an event in the suburbs of Philadelphia or in Boston or in, some other markets. Every market's a little bit different, but, so especially because the author doesn't live here, what can we do? So, again, it was the, putting your best foot forward. Who else do you want? What can we do? Have your impassioned plea for one author. And it took a while. I remember when I had that conversation with Chrissy initially, it took her coming to an additional one or two more speed datings. She came to New York, met with some publicists. A publicist and I were sitting down going over the Judy Blume tour. And she said, I'd love to try to do this with Doylestown instead of the free library, because I don't think that she's a right fit for the downtown Philadelphia audience. And I said, I agree with you. And we ended up, and we called Chrissy and said, what do you think? What would you like to do? She sent us a proposal specifically geared for Doylestown and Judy Blume. And we said, this is way better than what we think we can do with the Philly Free Library, because I think it's a better fit. And then it happened. And I'm not saying that Doylestown has now gotten every author that the Philly Free Library wants, because that's not the case at all. I think that they still get a very strong, high number of author events in that area. And I think the best that I can say, at least for Penguin Random House, is that we're making strides and letting people know with these speed datings, with publicists, and with, the event managers and event directors coming into New York to kind of say, here's who we are. We're outside of Philly. It's more than just a library. But at no point when Chrissy or even when Kit would talk to the publicist does she say, we're better than the Philly Free Library, because there are some publicists that have really close relationships with Andy and with the library. I know Andy pretty well as well. And so, so they've done it in a way to not make it seem like it's us versus them, but kind of say, here's an alternative. Here's what else we can do. I think there was one store, for a little while, there was a different store outside of Philly in the suburbs that was thinking, it's closed now, but they were thinking maybe we would do that. They would offer some sort of alternative that, they're far enough away from Philly that you could do an evening event on a Thursday, but then their particular demographic had a number of families that had stay-at-home moms that would come out for an afternoon event. So they were saying, could we tack on an afternoon event before the author leaves the area? Could they come out to where I live in the suburbs, where my store is, and do like a noon or 11 or a 1 o'clock lunch or something like that? That's something a little bit different than what the library offers. So I think it's a matter of looking at trying to offer a slightly different programming. I think the fact of the matter is the library is not going to go away, to be completely honest with you. Sorry to not warn everybody. I tend to be a little bit blunt with some things. So I think the library is not going away. Their relationship with publishers is not going to go away. And they're going to be getting some of the big authors that you all would love to have. But I think it's a matter of seeing presenting yourselves and seeing what you can offer instead of or in addition to what the Philly Free Library does.
And that's what we did. We ended up tacking on an evening appearance after an afternoon appearance at the Free Library. And what we did in order to make sure there was enough space was we coordinated with a local college to use their historical theater building, which is one of my favorite offsite venues that we have. And we had that person appear at the Free Library in the afternoon and then come to us in the evening. And we've also done it the other way, where we had an afternoon appearance of somebody. Not sure if that was with the Free Library or with another venue in Philly, but our afternoon appearance did very well also. So that's a reason to set up some kind of relationship with some local organization that has room, be it a high school, a college, an elementary school, anywhere that has a big space that you can say, hey, we'll open this up to your people from your organization if we can use your space to have this event here at this time.
And sometimes those local universities will say, yes, you can use our space, but can you give us 50 or 100 free tickets to offer to faculty and to staff? So I think that if, you come back to us and you say, we'd love to host X author, we can do them at this local university, they'll promote it, they're going to give away 50 or 75 or whatever quantity free tickets to their university and staff that does not include a copy of the book, but then we still then have another 400 tickets to sell to our customers and to additional faculty and staff, and but all you had to give them was 100 free tickets without a book to get this venue that seats 500 or 600 for free, that, which could cost $5,000. To me, 100 tickets seems worth it to save $5,000 to use that money for something else.
That's good. So I think that's important as well, is that when when you're doing the business development of this marketing, you have to start looking at what is unique for your store and what you can bring to the table and start these collaborations. It's the way we can all benefit having a library close by. So I think that's all great tips as well. In light of the time, it's a little after 12. I think I'd like to wrap. Eileen, do you have anything you want to close us out with?
Well, I just want to remind everyone, Thursday, February 1st, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all there, and I'm very confident you're all going to have a very successful day.
Thank you. Thank you to Lara, to Kit, to Eileen. Thank you so much for everyone who took the time out of their day to sign up for this call. This will be recorded, and so you can review the slides and hear the recording again, share it with your staff, and also there'll be a document in the notes of the webinar that is a tool just to prep. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email them over to myself or anyone else on the team, and we'd love to hear back from you, and we'll see you at speed dating.